Buckeyes, of course, take a huge step toward getting back on track and toward their goals for 2024. We got Pat Murphy on the line, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Purdue is the next opponent in Columbus. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I am doing just fine. So much speculation about how this team would rebound or respond after the Nebraska game. And I know that on the scoreboard, it was a close game. There was certainly a play to be made here and there where Penn State could have been right there, certainly knocking on the doorstep of the goal line a couple times to win this game. But it just had the appearance to me that Ohio State was clearly the better team, the more physically imposing team. And I would consider, outside of a couple mistakes that were rather glaring and rather impactful to the scoreboard, that was a successful effort.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. It felt a lot during the game like some of the stuff from the Oregon game Ohio State played a few weeks before. It wasn't as crazy fast-paced in the first half as the Oregon game, where I felt like I was just constantly typing because there were things going on every second. But, the Ohio State had opportunities in that game to take a 2-score lead and maybe, seal the deal early, in the second half, especially, and just couldn't get the job done. And it kind of felt like that was going to happen again against Penn State. You do make some early mistakes, obviously the pick six being one of them. You respond to that, and then you have a couple drives where there are opportunities to go up by multiple scores, and Buckeyes couldn't do it. And then, Penn State gets down in the fourth quarter and has the drive where Tyler Warren gets the Nittany Lions down to the 3-yard line, and the Buckeyes have to have a goal line stand just to avoid Penn State tying the game. And even then, it was still, okay, well, there's 5 minutes and 13 seconds left on the clock, backed up on your own 1-yard line. It seems likely that Penn State's going to get the ball with decent field position here to try and score and tie the game late. But the Buckeyes are able to grind out the clock almost, I think, exclusively actually on the ground. So I think this was development from Ohio State. I think Oregon is a better team, but you saw them overcome some of the mistakes that they weren't able to overcome against Oregon. And especially that last drive, really, the goal line stand, they had one of those in Oregon, but the last drive to really just kill the game on the ground with the way that they did and run the clock out, I thought was probably the most impressive thing they did in that game.
Absolutely. We'll stay right there with the offensive line because there was a substantial upgrade on the defensive side from Nebraska to Penn State. So based on how they performed against Nebraska, the obvious thought was, wow, how are they going to do against Penn State? And when they averaged 2.7 yards per carry between their two major backs the week before, and that jumps to 6 yards per carry between those guys. And again, it's one thing to do it throughout the course of the game, but when you're backed up at your own goal line, there's 5 minutes left, and they know you're going to run the ball, and they still can't stop you. That was I don't want to call it a dominating performance, but it was close. They controlled the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at that group now, that offensive line group coming out of that game, Buckeye fans are asking, where was this 2 weeks ago? Why was Zen Michalski the guy at left tackle after he was getting beaten by, Nebraska's defensive ends when Donovan Jackson, who was playing left guard, looked more than capable to handle that job? Yes, Abdul Carter beat him. I think it was twice for sacks, but Abdul Carter's beaten a lot of people and people that have played left tackle, right? Not guys moving over from left guard. So, where was that? Where has Carson Hinsman been? I think it was 343 days, I think was what I counted, between starts for Carson Hinsman after starting at center for the Buckeyes against Michigan to end the 2023 season, didn't play in the bowl game, and now making his next start against Penn State. Ryan Day said after the game they wanted to go with experience. That seemed to work. Two guys who have played in tough environments before. I think also Carson Hinsman playing a guard position instead of center allowed him to not have to think as much. Helps playing between Donovan Jackson and Seth McLaughlin, no doubt about it. But he didn't have to worry about making calls or or snapping the ball or things like that. He just had to go block the guy in front of him, and that certainly helped. And we talked last week, Mark, the issues weren't just Zen Michalski, right? It was the offensive line in general didn't play as well as it had. And I thought they figured that out, whether it was just having somebody new in there that was young and inexperienced, whatever the case may be, they were able to handle things throughout the game for the most part against Penn State, which outside of Abdul Carter is a good defensive line and a good front seven, frankly. And then that last drive was just kind of the culmination of it, of let's go put the game on our back. Let's win it on the ground so that Penn State has to call its timeouts and all that. If you don't get 5 yards, I think it was, on that first play on a QB sneak, you're probably still punting the ball, or at least, maybe you have to throw and you risk an incompletion, and Penn State keeps timeouts. So that gets it started, and then just play after play with the running backs, and then Will Howard twice on third downs, one design run and one where he kept the ball on the last play to pick up 7 yards, which ended up being basically the last play of the game. This is what, when Ohio State talks about, we need to be tough and things like that, like, you don't have to go out and necessarily bully people or whatever. These are the type of performances you need to have. And I think, frankly, if you go back to last year against Michigan, Ohio State did some of that, right? There was the one drive, I think it was in the third quarter, where it was almost exclusively Travion Henderson running the ball. And those were the type of things that were positive to see. Yes, you lost the game. You lost the game by one score to a really good team. And those things happen on the road. That's what happened at Oregon. But you need to see this from Ohio State more often than not, is just that ability, like you said, to just dominate with the offensive line, dominate on the ground. Sure, you have these great receivers. You have a good quarterback when he's not making those mistakes. But that's great, and that's good to have in certain situations. But in situations like these, you need to be able to do the other side of that, which is win it on the ground.
The playmakers made some plays. They also left some plays on the field. Sure. Obviously, Will Howard fumbles the ball in what I consider to be a stupid rule in the rule book, where it doesn't fall in line with the structure of how the rest of the field is ruled in terms of boundaries. But anyway, where you give the side of the football to the defense, even though they didn't recover the football. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Will Howard's got to learn from that situation, that somebody can catch him from behind and knock the ball loose, and he fumbles. There's a 7-point play right there. And of course, he throws the pick six. But Jeremiah Smith should have caught a touchdown pass. It's just not any situation where there was an awful throw or a flat out drop, but I thought it was a really good throw, and Jeremiah Smith should have just, I think he's caught too many footballs, maybe with one hand or something. He thinks he needs to catch all of them with one hand, but there were obviously some plays out. There was a throw to Carnell Tate down the left side or the right sideline that he made a remarkable catch, but he had to catch it like 18 feet out of bounds because the ball wasn't thrown where it needed to be.
Yeah, there were plenty of plays. And look, I think you could say this. You go back to any game, you could probably find plays where teams want it back, especially if you're the losing team. But I think you covered most of them there in terms of what could have been. If you hit on a couple of those, the Carnell Tate one, it was a great route by Carnell Tate to beat his man, and Will Howard just puts it a little too far out of bounds, not giving his receiver the chance to catch it inbounds. The Jeremiah Smith one, Ryan Day was asked about that. He said that with Penn State's safeties as deep as they were, Jeremiah did not think the ball was going to come to him. And then by the time he realized it was coming to him, it was a bit too late, and he tried to make up for it with what you said, stretching out one hand and couldn't do it. I know some other people speculated maybe it was the sun. I almost thought that Jeremiah Smith expected the ball to be underthrown, because with the exception of the touchdown pass to Jeremiah Smith against Nebraska, his big plays his big deep shots have been underthrown at times by Will Howard. So whatever the reason was, the play was not made. I assume Ryan Day and Jeremiah Smith have talked about this now, and that's why he said what he said. But yes, opportunities were there to make this a game where Ohio State won pretty comfortably. But I think at the end of the day, getting out of that game with a win was the most important thing. Do you look forward and say, okay, now if you get in these situations again, how do you respond? Can you get the bigger lead? Things like that. Sure. But I think you were in a top 3, top 4 game on the road against a good team, hostile environment, very similar to the Oregon game. And this time you came out on top. If you're in these, you've now been in 2 of these situations with similar things happening. You've won one, you've lost one. You just need to make those plays to ensure you win them in the future.
And so now, Pat, they've got a situation where they're an overwhelming favorite, not just for the next game, for the next 2 weeks. So they would have to completely go to sleep to lose either one of these games or be in a game against Purdue or Northwestern. So Indiana's the next one that could be a significant challenge. And it appears on paper that it will be a significant challenge, even though Indiana has yet to face anybody close to Ohio State. So what do you think we need to see over the next 2 weeks on both sides of the ball that would make you a little bit more comfortable in regards to this team fully reaching its potential?
Not the Nebraska game again. I think that's pretty much it. And Will Howard admitted today, the team was probably, looking past Nebraska a little bit, thought that they could come out of the bye week and just handle that. So I think they've learned their lesson there. But I would like to see this offensive line, and from what Ryan Day said, sounds like they're going to stick with this 5, even if Zen Michalski does come back later this season. I'd like to see this offensive line just continue to build chemistry, build on that final drive, be able to continue to do things where you can have a drive where they run that many plays or the majority of the plays down the field and are creating holes for the running backs consistently. I'd like to see Will Howard play some mistake-free football. Early in the season, he wasn't throwing interceptions. It's been a while since he has had a game where even when his completion percentage is high, there seems to be 1 or 2 of those plays a game, whether it happens or not, that could be a turnover. So I'd like to see him play without those in these type of games. And defensively, I think it's just more of the same. Ryan Day said they had to re-engineer some things on the defensive side of the ball during the off week after the Oregon loss. Not that they completely changed everything, but they sort of got back to what do we do best? How do we best put our best players in situations to be successful? Jim Knowles called it basically going back to the fundamentals. And I think from kind of reading between the lines there, it's the fundamentals of Jim Knowles' defense and not so much the fundamentals of Jim Knowles' defense at Ohio State. I think they've been able to make it look more like what we expected of a Jim Knowles defense the last couple of weeks. So, it's just building on what you've done. If they go out against Purdue and we get to halftime and it's a 7 or 10 point game, as much as Ryan Day talked today about Purdue's a better team than their record and all that, we watched Oregon go to West Lafayette, and while it wasn't Oregon's best game, win by 35 points, I think 35-0. This Purdue team has not been good this season. Go out there. This should almost be like some of those non-conference games, maybe not the margin, but just the comfortability of going out there, executing, getting starters out early, avoiding injuries, those type of things.
Yeah, we just released our Big Ten power rankings, by the way, Pat. Yeah, Purdue is the worst team in the Big Ten. They've had that lockdown, that position for the entire season. They are. Yes, everybody else has shown us something at some point. They did take Illinois to overtime, to their credit there, and they could have won this game actually against Northwestern last weekend. But otherwise, they have gotten steamrolled this season. So yeah, the Buckeyes have an opportunity, obviously, to clean things up over the next couple of weeks, get people healthy, take guys out of the game, hopefully in the third or fourth quarters, and get ready for Indiana. Pat Murphy, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Please join Pat and his work right there. Pat, appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.